Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make a chicken, mushroom, and stellini soup with some banana walnut muffins and some kind of double cheese quesadillas. So let's start by getting our yellow onion here sliced up and sliced and diced and sauteed, and then we'll start working on our muffins. So I've got one good size yellow onion. We'll peel all of this whole off before we kind of cut it in half and dice it up. And then we'll start sauteing it because we do want to caramelize it and get that nice rich onion flavor out. It's just going to add some wonderful flavors to our broth, which is really what, when you're making soups and stews, you really want that broth to have all that flavor. Here we go. So we've got those first half done. And it doesn't have to be too, small on the dice because, again, we want nice little onion bites in every spoonful of our soup. There we go. So we've got our one onion all diced up here. I'm going to put in about, I want to say, a tablespoon of olive oil into our little Dutch oven here. We're going to turn on the heat to about a 6, so medium high. And we'll let these start to saute up. Get all of this. And again, you want your onions to really caramelize, bring out that flavor. Just kind of think about how with French onion soup, you really let those onions caramelize to get that great broth. Okay, those are a little bit.
You have questions? So are you back from camping?
We are back from camping. We had a lot of fun. There was absolutely no service anywhere where we went. None. I felt like when we finally got back into society, my phone just was ping, 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 ping from all the messages and missed emails, missed everything. It was actually really nice to kind of be, away from society for a while. Even though we went to Dollywood, there was no service at Dollywood either, which really surprised me because I figured, it's kind of in the middle of there. No service anywhere. But it was wonderful and relaxing, and the weather was great for it. Okay, we are going to start working on our banana muffins. I've got 3 very, very ripe bananas. I popped them in the fridge before I left so that we can make some delicious banana bread with them. The browner, the better. They get sweeter with time, and that flavor really comes out when you bake it. So you don't want to use bananas that are good for eating, as in like you can peel it open and eat it right then. It's going to give you a very bland banana bread. So we get these guys all in there, and you can see they've got this nice kind of rich brown color. That's from the natural sugars in there, and it's going to make it to be a really sweet and delicious banana bread with a lot of that flavor. So I'm going to go in with my fork here, and we're going to mash it up. And just to get any of the big clumps out, but luckily these are very, very ripe bananas. So we shouldn't have any big chunks. And that's, again, why you want to use overly ripe bananas, because otherwise you'll get these big chunks of bananas in your muffin that just aren't as good. So we've got our 3 super ripe bananas. And now we're going to add in our granulated sugar and our brown sugar. So I make a lot of variations of banana muffins or banana bread, depending on how I'm feeling. Today I'm going with the basic. So we're going to start with a cup of granulated sugar, and then we're going to add in a half a cup of brown sugar. We got a big sugar clump in there, but that's fine. So 1 cup of granulated, half a cup of brown sugar. And make sure it's firmly packed. Now, if you love more of that brown sugar flavor, that kind of caramelized, but you could switch it up and do a cup of brown and a half a cup of granulated for a little bit more richer in flavor.
I have a question. Could you freeze the black bananas if you don't have time to use them right then?
Yes. The only thing I would recommend you do is peel them first. So when they're dark brown, peel them and put them in a bag because when they're frozen, they're very, very hard to peel. And then so always peel them, and then you can kind of actually just make them mash, and then you can de-thaw it when you use it. Works really well. Okay. I'm going to mix in our sugars with our bananas, and this is going to turn into like a banana soup as those sugars start to dissolve with the banana mash. Okay, let me get out my spatula here now that we're kind of done mashing. Put that in the sink, and we'll start stirring this guy up. But again, this is just the sweet part of our banana muffins. And this is just a really good classic but moist banana bread recipe. So we've got these all mixed in here. And then we're going to add in a half a cup of melted butter, which is the same as 1 stick. And I'm using salted butter. Here we go. Get a little bit of this out. Let's mix it in. There we go. And this is going to give just a really great texture to our banana bread, make it really moist and lovely. Beautiful. Okay. We're going to add in a cup of sour cream. Again, I have a lot of variations. Sometimes I do sourdough discard, banana bread, regular one. This one I'm using sour cream in it for this banana muffins because it does make it very, very moist and wonderful. And we're going to use a whole cup in here. So it's going to be, let's see, maybe a spoonful more. And this is, sometimes I feel like banana bread, if it isn't done right, it can be kind of dry and crumbly. The sour cream gives you this just kind of more cake-like, very moist deliciousness texture to it. So we're going to mix that sour cream in, making sure we get some of those big clumps out. And then we're going to add in 2 eggs, and then I will add in our vanilla and our baking soda and salt. And then last, our flour. But I'm going to take a quick pause, and we're going to give our onions a little stir here. I'm going to turn it down to about a 5 now. So just bringing it down to more of a medium now that my Dutch oven is nice and warm. Bring these down, but you can see we're starting to get this nice kind of golden brown color to our onions. So we're starting to get that natural sweetness out, which will be lovely for our broth, for our soup. Okay. Just do a couple little clumps here with that sour cream. Beautiful. Okay, we're going to add in 2 eggs. And the eggs are going to sometimes I just use 1, but the 2 eggs are going to make these a little bit more fluffy and a little bit lighter. And this is going to make, a little bit more than, a dozen muffins, because you can stretch it out if you want to. I do like to fill mine up kind of high, so we get a good dome on it. But here. Oh, and you know what I realized? I forgot to grab my measuring spoons. And we're going to use 1 whole teaspoon of baking soda. So the eggs mixed with the baking soda is going to give us our, or rise in our bread. There we go. And then we're also going to add in a teaspoon of salt. And if you were to use unsalted butter, you might want to add a little bit more, like another 1/4 of a teaspoon or whatnot. And then a whole tablespoon of vanilla extract.
You have a question. How was the weather when you were camping?
Oh, it was wonderful. We had like low 60s, maybe high 50s at night. And then during the day, I don't think we got above 70, like 78. I think one day was just a little toastier, but wonderful. I was in a sweatshirt the whole time, so I was not bothered by it. Imagine that, in a sweatshirt. But it was really great weather. I love it when it's cool at night and you have just that kind of perfect, temperatures. So it was so nice. It was definitely much better than this summer when we were the Indiana Dunes National Park. And we had that one day where it was in like the mid 90s. Even at night, it was like in the 90s, and that was so hot. This was just wonderful. Okay, we're going to mix these in really well for our banana bread. And I'm just going to make sure I've got one little clump of sour cream right here. I just want to mix through it. There we go. So we don't have our flour in here yet, but this is a time where you can really mix in your ingredients. Once you add your flour in, you don't want to really mix any more, because the more you mix it after the flour, especially with the butter base, it's going to make a denser muffin. Okay, let me give this a quick stir. Beautiful. So we've got this nice kind of golden brown color going on. This is going to be the onions for our soup. We want to caramelize them up for our chicken and mushroom stellini soup, which will be delicious.
How much baking soda did you add?
I added in 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Okay, so we're going to do 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and we're going to mix these in until they're just barely mixed in. And then I'm going to do a couple of my muffins without nuts. So I'll scoop those in first, and then the rest will get nuts, because some of my kids don't like nuts. Crazy, I know. Okay, so 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And again, don't overmix this. This is why I like to use an actual spoon and use some elbow grease to mix it up versus a hand mixer, because a hand mixer can really overmix this. So we're just going to kind of incorporate this until that flour just is barely mixed in. And now this is a butter base to our batter, so it is going to be much thicker than if you were to use an oil base. Here we go. And then once it's barely mixed in, we're going to scoop out part of it, and then we'll put in our walnuts. But again, think about with like pancake batter, you want a nice lumpy, chunky batter. So just make sure you don't have any flour pockets at the bottom of your bowl. And then we'll go around and we'll just give this a good scrape. But this is the base to our banana muffins. Okay. And now I'm going to put these in, and then we'll do half of our nuts. But just an easy way, like, to make a variety of them is you can just add in a little, do some plain, do some with nuts or chocolate chips. You can actually do craisins. There's lots of varieties you can do with banana bread. Okay. I'm going to grab a metal spoon, because I find it is much easier to scoop my batter, especially with a nice thick batter like this, with a spoon. Because these first ones are made without nuts, I'm going to fill up my middle 2 with them, my middle section, because they will actually kind of cook up a little bit slower than the outer section, and those nuts really kind of weigh down your batter, which makes it take sometimes a little bit longer. So we'll get these guys and fill them up.
And how much flour did you use?
2 cups of flour, of all-purpose flour. So it makes a bit more than a, what did I say, like 12 muffins, especially if you don't fill them up all the way. But it's a really delicious one. I also kind of use this as the base for my banana bars, because it's just a really lovely kind of a sweet banana muffin flavor that gives you lots of banana flavor. Okay, let's mix in our nuts here. So I've got some chopped walnuts here. And I love walnuts, but you could also use pecans with these as well. And we're going to I'm going to add in about 2 handfuls of walnuts, which is around a half a cup or so, maybe a little bit more, depending on how much you really grab with your hand. And we're just going to give this, a light mix into it. If you wanted to do the whole thing with nuts, you could use about a cup for it for a good, nice, nutty one. Here we go. So we've got those nuts mixed in, and now we're going to scoop and fill these guys up. So I'm going to go through with 1 big scoop in each one, and then I'll come back over and add a second scoop. go. Oop, missed it. And now for our nice one. Now, again, if you wanted to just fill these up to be, 3/4 of the way, you can, and then stretch it even farther. But the more that when you make your batter up higher, you should get a nice dome on it when it bakes up, which makes these just really lovely. Here we go. Beautiful. And then I should have enough to make between, 3 and 6 more for my next kind of a second half batch of it. So I'm going to save this over here for later. Let me wash my hands. And we're going to go pop this in the oven. And this is going to bake at 300 for about 20 minutes. Now at 20 minutes, I'll check. Sometimes it needs a little bit more. It really just depends on how big your bananas are, how much liquid they have in them or whatnot. So let's set our timer for 20 minutes. And let's start working on our soup now that our onions are nice and caramelized. I always say it's nice to kind of prep something because this caramelization process to get these lovely kind of golden brown onions that we have right here takes a good, 5 to 10 minutes, but it's really worth it for bringing out this lovely flavor in our soup. Okay, almost lost a carrot there. I have got 2 kind of leftover heads of celery here. So we're going to cut the bottom off, and then I'm just going to cut these kind of tops off here. And we're going to use this. This is probably, the same as if using, I want to say like 4 or 5 big full-size stalks of celery. But here I've just got a lot of little baby ones. I'm going to kind of cut them down in half. This one's pretty big, so that when I dice them up, I don't have super huge pieces of celery. That way, I like when I'm eating my soups and stewed, not necessarily having huge chunks of vegetables or meat, but more of having smaller bits that allow me to get a lovely bite in every spoonful. And keep the leaves on, if you have any on there, because those leaves will add a lot of rich flavor to our broth. Here we go. So a nice kind of small dice here. Perfect. So this is about, I want to say maybe 1.5 cups of celery diced up. Again, it should be close to 5 big full-size stalks with their leaves on. We're going to throw these in here because the caramelized onion and this celery is going to add our flavor to our broth, which is just going to make it absolutely delicious. There we go. Give this a nice stir, coat it up with those caramelized onions. And now I'm going to turn it up to about a 4. I had turned it down to about a 3 after a little bit with the caramelized, but I want those to kind of heat up. I'm going to wash my hands because I got a little bit of celery lettuce on them. Or celery lettuce, celery leaves. Okay. Let's do our carrots next. I've got about 5 full-size carrots, although 2 of them are really small. So this is more like 4 good-sized carrots. We're going to give them a good peel. Then we'll chop their tops and bottom off and then, quarter/halve them and then dice them up so that we have some great carrots. Again, this is going to add great flavor to our broth. The sweetness of the carrots will complement the caramelized onions and add a wonderful pop of color to our soup stew as well. We're going with really simple. I was kind of deciding. I was kind of craving like my wild rice, my chicken, mushroom, and wild rice soup, but I didn't have any wild rice. So I was like, ooh, we can make a variation of this, but use stelline, which is little star pasta instead, to get us, kind of on that same plane of it, but be, delicious. And then we're going to use some dried thyme as our main herb in here because I find like chicken, mushrooms, and thyme just work really well together. And then, of course, I've got some dinosaur kale. to add a little bit of greenery and some fresh green onions. Okay, we've got these all peeled up.
Dinosaur?
Yes, dinosaur kale. That's what it is. The really big kale with the big fluffy leaves is called dinosaur kale. I don't know where it's got its name. Maybe because back in the dinosaur ages, they had mega flora and fauna, and it's a really big type, but who knows? I'm not sure. Maybe it was just some scientist having fun, wishing he was a paleontologist. Instead, he's studying kale. Okay, let's get these tops chopped off. And then for these little ones, I'm not going to have these yet until I get to where they're a little bit thicker, because those are about the size of the, carrot pieces that I want. Again, nice smaller bites to where you can get more in every little mouthful. And we'll get these in there. I feel like I've been kind of craving a nice soup since, coming back, because the weather, I feel like while we are gone, has completely switched to fall. Like today, the high is like 70 here, which is just wonderful. So it's kind of that cooler, nice, lovely weather. And I'm like, ooh, we finally have shed the 80s. I'm not a big fan of when the fall hangs on. Okay. So let's get these guys. And then we'll throw them in our soup here. But let me give our celery and our caramelized onions a nice stir for this. And I will say this is like the key part to making a really good soup, especially to have a nice rich broth, is don't just throw all your vegetables into some broth. That's going to give you a more bland soup. This one, we're going to caramelize the veggies, saute them, which is going to bring out some more depth of their flavor, give them a nice texture, which is going to give us a better base to our soup. Here we go. Let's get these last ones chopped up, and then we can throw them in. Also, when you cut them up smaller like this, they will cook up a lot faster, which is always nice when I like to do my lunchtime, meals or lunchtime soups. I like to make them in like 30 minutes or less. There we go. So we're going to stir these carrots in with our celery and our caramelized onions. Beautiful. We're going to just let that heat up. Of course, I'm always jump a few pieces out. And one more hiding from me. There we go. There we go. So we'll let those saute up. And while these are kind of prepping here, we're going to add in some thyme. We want a good teaspoon of dried thyme. You could use fresh thyme as well. With fresh thyme, you'd probably want to use closer to a tablespoon of it. And then I'm going to pop in 2 bay leaves to kind of toast up. Looks like I've got a couple little bits of bay leaves. We'll use those little ones. And then 1 full one here. And a little black pepper.
You have a question? Do you ever use crock pot?
I used to use crock pots a lot when I was working, when I was teaching and I was working out of the house. And then when our house when we had to remodel our kitchen a couple of years ago, we kind of turned our office into a makeshift kitchen. And I used a lot of like crock pots in my Instapot then. And after like having to cook with that for like 4 months straight, I like swore it off for a while. Now I still use it occasionally when I'm gone out of the house all day for soccer and whatnot. But if I'm home, I prefer to cook things naturally, like, with the pot and pan versus the crock pot. Because while I feel like the crock pot is great, especially for, certain recipes, it cooks everything the same time at the same thing, which typically ends with not as nice of an end product because you're not getting to saute off the veggies and put them in at different times. So if I don't need to use it because of time constraints, then I don't. Although I will say it is definitely great when I was working. I would make a lot of like, you know, pork stew, beef stews, bases, things that I could put in right before I left and could cook on low all day while I was gone. That was always was nice. And I feel like growing up, my mom was like the queen of crock pot meals. I feel like we had them like 5 days a week. There we go. And it's so funny now they've make, the crock pots have improved, but growing up she had the one with like the green ceramic base and the white cream outside. If I felt like it had like little vegetables on it, the old school one. Okay, let's give this a nice toss. We got our herbs in here cooking up. I always like to add my herbs in with my veggies and saute them to really bring in their flavors. It hydrates them and it kind of melds them up. Okay, and then we're gonna mix in our mushrooms here for our base of our soup. Let them saute for a little bit. Here we go. And coat these guys up. We'll let these mushrooms sit for just a second and let them kind of get a little heat on them. Got little things on here. And while we're waiting for that to kind of heat up, mix up, let's prep up our dinosaur kale, which is correctly named. I know it's a funny one. We're going to pull off our leaves. I just like to leave the leaves and take out the stalk. So you just kind of pull it off. You can keep the stalk on if you want to. It's just not as nice in the texture. It has more of that flavor, that stronger, bitter flavor to it. And then we'll chop this up. If you don't have kale, you could definitely use spinach, but with spinach, you're going to wait until the very end to add it in because spinach is going to wilt fairly quickly. It's still lovely in soups, but it doesn't hold its form quite as well. And a little bit of like once you put your spinach in, it kind of like disappears to nothing, where kale gives you a little bit more body. Okay. Looks like I got all of our dinosaur kale. And we're going to chop this up nice so that we have just good, smaller pieces of it.
You have a question. Is that the same as Tuscan kale?
I believe so. I feel like they're all the same variations. It's kind of just whatever one you get. Whenever I buy it, it always says dinosaur kale on it, but it looks exactly the same, so I'm assuming it's the exact same. I bet you this trying to appeal to the younger crowds, Ooh, what's dinosaur kale? Maybe if I tell Teddy it's dinosaur kale, he'll eat it. He a lot of times will just pick around the green bits on my soup. And I'm just like, but they're delicious. You won't notice them. Okay. Now these we won't pour in until we have our broth going, because you don't need to saute them off for this. Let's get these mushrooms kind of tucked under. And then before we actually start adding in our broth, we're going to sprinkle a little bit of flour over this because this is going to make more of a thicker kind of stew base. So where's my flour? We're going to sprinkle these on here. You don't need a whole lot of flour for this. I'm just kind of do a nice little sprinkle over the top. This is just going to help thicken it up to give you just a slightly richer in texture broth for our kind of mushroom soup. But don't put too much because you don't want it to be too thick. So I'm just using about 2 tablespoons because we are going to be adding in our pasta for this. So we're going to mix this in now. And we're going to let it heat up for just a second. And then we're going to slowly pour in our water, or you could use chicken broth. I'm going to use water with a big scoop of chicken bouillon for the base of our soup. Here we go. Beautiful. So I've got 4 cups of water. We're going to pour in 1 cup first. And then we're going to mix all of this around. And it's going to just kind of thicken up into a nice paste. But this is going to allow you to kind of deglaze the bottom of your pan, get off any of those cooked on spices or deliciousness. It allows it to heat up so you're not just flooding your soup with water or broth. I'm going to add in another cup. And again, give it a good stir here. And really allow them to kind of work together. Scrape all your guys' little sides. There's always little bits that like to jump up and hide from you. And now, one more cup. Beautiful. And then we'll add in our last cup. Now I'm going to add in a good spoonful of chicken bouillon. You could also use vegetable bouillon for this, but since we are going to be adding in some shredded rotisserie chicken, chicken works better. But if you wanted to keep it more vegetarian, you could do that as well with some vegetable broth. So we're going to do a nice big heaping tablespoon. This is going to add the saltiness to our broth. I'm going to actually put in the last little bit of this because there's very little left. So I won't have to add any more salt in it or anything like that. Here we go. I'll mix this in. And I might actually add just a teensy bit more broth because I want to have enough liquid in here for my stelline pasta. So I'm going to add 5 cups of broth. There we go. Because the stelline pasta is going to soak up some extra liquid and reduce it down. So you don't want to have too little, then you're going to get more of a pasta dish than a soup. Okay, let me give this a little taste. Delicious. Okay, when you do your stars for your pasta, no, this is called stelline, which means little stars in Italian. Just because it's so small, don't put a whole bunch in because it absorbs a lot of water and it gets bigger in size. So I'm going to use, that's about 1/4 of a cup. I'm going to use about 1/2 of a cup of stelline pasta because this is going to grow in size. They get pretty, a lot bigger. And again, if you put too much in there, it will just suck all the liquid out of your stew and give you more of a pasta dish than a soup with some stars in it. We're going to let those kind of cook up and heat up. Once it comes to a boil, we'll add in our chicken, and then we'll add in our kale, and then finally our green onions. But we're going to let that simmer and bring it up to a nice high temp. I'm going to move this over here, and we're going to make our little kind of quesadillas for dipping into our soup because I love it. So they're kind of, I will say, maybe like a wrap versus a quesadilla. But I've got 2 good sized burritos. And then we're going to do a mixture of havarti and gouda because it plays really well with the mushroom and the chicken and the thyme. Those flavors, I think, just play really well together. Move that more on my burner here. So I got my good old block of Gouda cheese. And then I've got some havarti cheese. Both of these are good semi-soft cheeses that melt really well, which make them wonderful for kind of wrap type bases. Okay, let me grab my butter over here. And we've got about a couple minutes left on our muffins. We'll check those out. You don't need a whole lot of butter, but you're going to spread it on just one side of your tortilla here. I'm using the big tortillas. And because I have 2 left, and I was like, oh, these will be perfect. And one more. And just nice and thin. This is going to allow it to kind of crisp up, get a great kind of crunch on it, which just makes it lovely. But again, you don't need hardly any butter for this. I'll flip these guys over. And let's start with our havarti cheese. And I'm going to, instead of just leaving it in like the big squares, I'm just going to break it up for this. because I'm going to roll it up in a wrap so that we can kind of toast it up on both sides. So almost like a burrito or like filled with cheese, but not quite a quesadilla because I want to be able to dip it. So we've got that. Let's get this guy over here. Oops. Now you could do any cheese that you wanted. Just think about like quesadillas, any cheese you want. They all go great. I mean, you want to stick with more of the semi-soft cheeses because they melt a little bit better versus some of the harder cheeses. But for this, I kind of picked what is going to go well with that chicken and that mushroom and that thyme flavor, especially for kind of dunking in and dipping in. Okay. And then let's get our gouda because it's good cheese. Here we go. Swiss would go well with this as well. Edam, a butter queso. Just your milder, semi-soft cheeses work really well. Beautiful. Okay, one more little peel. Let's go check on our muffins. See how they are. I always like we put them in for 20 minutes. And these are our banana muffins. Some are with walnuts, some are without.
You have a question? What's your doctorate in?
Educational leadership and policy. So I did a lot. I was a teacher beforehand. Look at these beautiful things. So I'm going to pull them out just a little bit, give them a touch. You know what? I think I want them in for about 1 to 2 minutes more. I'm going to rotate them. You want them to make sure that your tops of your muffins are firm. Because if they're not firm, what will happen is they will sink in when you take them out. So I'm going to put my timer on here for 1 minute and 45 seconds. Doesn't need much longer. But again, you just never know how much juice is in your banana for it. But so before Teddy was born, I worked as a teacher at a lab school. So I had both children with disabilities, typically developing children, and then I also taught undergraduate and graduate students on teaching and how they can teach methods and working with children. Really love the job. But then when I became pregnant with Teddy, I decided I had worked through my first 3 kids that I wanted to stay home and with him. And so, I quit my job and did some consulting work and stuff at home. And loved it. And then we have Jack, and now I'm like, oh, maybe one day I'll go back, but been enjoying time at home, having a little bit more freedom with my schedule, and getting to spend some of the younger years with my kids, which I didn't really do with my older ones. So it's been fun. It's been nice. Here we go. So let me mix. I'm just making sure none of my noodles get stuck to the bottom of my pan. Now that we have a nice good boil on here, I'm going to taste my broth one more time too. Delicious. We're going to add in our chicken. This is the good old Costco rotisserie chicken that you can buy in these like 2.5 pound things. They're perfect for making like soups and stews really quickly on, during the week. So I'm just going to shred it in here and we'll add it in there. Now, you got to break it apart. You can't just, put it all the way in because it does just like fall like as a big chunk. And then it looks like our muffins are already ready. So once I get this in, we'll go check those out. So I've got a whole last bit. And then once this comes back up to a boil, we will put our kale in. Let me wash my hands real quick. And let's go check on those muffins now. They should be perfect. I said, don't think they need a whole lot more time in here. They cook up pretty quickly. And those are, I can tell just by the look at them. They're nice and firm. But look at these beautiful banana muffins with that nice dome. And that's what you get when you really fill them up nice and high. Gives you that bakery dome because everybody loves the top of the muffin. So we've got banana walnuts and just plain banana muffins. So my middle ones are my banana muffins, and then my outsides are my banana walnuts, because these actually get a little less heat than the outside, and those walnuts kind of really weigh them down to where they need a little bit more heat. Okay. I'm going to mix in my chicken here. Give this a good stir. We'll throw in our kale in just a little bit, but you can see we've got a richer broth on this. So it's not like a thin broth. It's got a nice richness, but not as thick as like a bisque. But that's just what makes the soup so lovely and homey, especially with that chicken and the mushroom and the thyme. But once it comes up to a nice boil here, I've got it cooking over medium heat. Then we'll throw in our kale. Let's get our little quesadilla wraps all kind of rolled up here. So just kind of like how you would do, a regular little like sandwich wraps, we're going to roll these up as well with our cheese inside. So we're going to have it like this, and then you're going to place it down on that firm side down there. That's going to allow it to crisp up. Again, we do have our butter on the outside of our little tortillas here. So it also kind of works as like a glue to help hold them together, but also giving you this nice crispy edge. So we're going to toast these up and let them kind of melt in there. So I've got them cooking over like a medium heat, around a 4 or 5. Let's get my hands washed because I got a little bit of butter on here. And we'll toast these guys up. So once we've added in, again, just you want to, whenever you use like rice or a small pasta, just make sure you take your spoon and scrape the bottom of it, because sometimes they'll like to stick to the bottom of your pan, and we don't want that. Here we go. Kind of mixing it up. Turn it up just a smidge. And now let's add in our kale, because we're starting to see a little bubble forming here. So it's ready for that to come in. Now, if you were going to use spinach instead of kale, what you're going to do is right at the very end, right before you're ready to kind of serve it up, that's when you're going to use, put your spinach in, because spinach wilts fairly quickly.
You have a question? Do you make homemade noodles for chicken noodle soup?
So I've made homemade noodles before, and I love it, but I have actually this freezer noodles that you can find in the grocery store, which is just as good as homemade noodles, but a fraction of the time. They're called Reams noodles. I love them. And I found them in most grocery stores, but they're like where you find like the frozen pasta. They have it there. And that has been like my go-to when I'm making like chicken noodle soup or whatnot, because they taste just like homemade, but none of the work. Now, whenever I make pasta, so like the other day we made some homemade pasta, and then I had leftovers, so then I made a beef and noodle soup for it. But that pasta is also great to use in chicken noodle soup. It's just a little bit, makes it a little bit easier. Although I do have a really good chicken noodle soup recipe and video I have, I think, on there for everyone, because chicken noodle soup is one of those things that when I make, like, anytime anybody gets sick or any of my mom's friends get sick, she's like, "Can you make a batch of chicken noodle soup for me?" Beautiful. Okay, now we're going to chop up some green onions to throw into our soup at the very end, kind of as a little garnish here, but it just brings in some nice flavor. I'm going to cut off this kind of really white tip of it, and we're going to start slicing these. You could also, if you have fresh thyme, you could pull off some leaves of the fresh thyme, mince them up. That will go in there. Let me first, before we finish cutting these up, let me check on these, see how we are sitting. Good. We're getting there. So turn it up just a smidge. And get these last ones. The green onions, just like if you're using parsley or any kind of a fresh herb kind of finishing garnish for flavor. You don't want to add them in too soon because they will wilt and they will lose their flavor. So to keep that really bright, fresh onion flavor, garnish it at the last minute.
Do you know what you're making tonight?
You know what? I actually have an idea of what I'm going to make tonight. So I was thinking about making some homemade pretzels, and then Costco had this German sausage variety pack. So I think I might make some homemade pretzels and these German sausage with some Brussels sprouts and kind of like a Oktoberfest meal. Because while we were we went to Anarchista while we were in Dollywood, and they were having their Bavarian Festival, which was it's like a German, beer and like food festival, kind of like Oktoberfest. And it was delicious, but it kind of got me in the mood for German food, which I, hold very dear because I did a foreign exchange in Germany when I was a kid, when I was in high school, and I lived there for a while. And so I had lots of German food, and my aunts and uncles and my grandmother live there now. So I was like, ooh, I should do that, kind of make it there. It was so delicious. Also, while we were there, totally not on topic, but we saw three bears. While we were at Anarchista, they have this high ropes course that goes through the forest. And as we were going across it, I first saw one bear walking down below, and I was not the calm, cool, quiet. I was like, bear, bear, alerting to everybody that there was a bear. And then we saw two more bears after that, and they totally did not care that we were there. They could smell the food from the food festival. Apparently, the day before or whatnot, in downtown Gatlinburg, one of the bears had gone up into this Mexican restaurant and like hopped the fence and was eating like somebody's tacos and sipping their margaritas. But it was just kind of funny on there. But so that's kind of like, ooh, let's do a little mini German fest.
You have a question? Are the kids excited for Halloween?
Oh, yes. We're still deciding what are going to be our costumes. So we normally do a big family costume every year where we kind of try to pull in everybody's interests and make a whole family costume. We've done some epic ones in the past. Beautiful. Look at those. We've done Pokemon. We've done Dragon Ball Z. We've done the Batman and Robin and like superheroes. We've done that twice. We did when Torn was a baby and Lena was we did Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Frozen.
We did Frozen, Nightmare Before Christmas. So we do a lot of big themes. There's been a couple years that we haven't done a theme, but we've done themes almost every single year since they were little. So it started out with the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and then it was Batman and Robin, then Frozen, then like the Batman and Robin. We've done that theme twice actually, but different costumes.
Chat wants you to cook that day in your costume.
Well, we'll see about that. It might not. Who knows? Sometimes my costumes are a little crazy. Was it last year we did the Nightmare Before Christmas theme because Jack was one and he was Jack Skellington, so he had to be Jack Skellington. And then Torn was Mr. Oogie Boogie, and he had one of those blow up puffy costumes, and it was so ridiculous on there, but it was so epically cool. Okay, look at this. We got our beautiful toasted little cheese wraps here. Let this one sit up just a smidge longer. And let's throw our green onions in our soup. But again, look at this beautiful stew here. As you can see, we've got our little stars in there. But if you add any more than like a half a cup, you're going to just have a pasta because you can see we don't have as much broth now because it absorbs it up. But we're going to add in, this is about a half a cup of green onions, a lot of it in here. It's going to add this lovely fresh flavor to our stew. Pop of green. It's so delicious for this. And then we're going to be ready to serve up because we want to put this in at the very last. Beautiful. I know I was almost thinking about when I was making this, I'm like, ooh, maybe I should make biscuits, to have a little biscuit crust on top of that. I was thinking about it, but this one out. Okay. Got to get my little cauldrons. And let me grab. We're going to get ready to serve up.
I have a question. Did your parents miss your cooking while you were gone?
They definitely did, although I tried to make sure I made a big batch of galumki, but the cabbage rolls before I left, because my mom was out of town for part of it. So it was just really my stepdad. So I made a bunch of food before they left, so they didn't have to wait too long. Let me grab a ladle here and grab one of our little cheese quesadilla wraps. Okay, let's get our Parmesan cheese ready, and then we're going to serve up our soup here and our wraps for it, and of course our muffins. Okay, for lunch today, we have our beautiful cheesy wrap. Do you see that lovely cheesy pull in here? Which is going to be delicious for putting in our dipping in our soup. And then we have our homemade chicken and mushroom soup with Stelline pasta in here. And it's got a nice thicker broth base to it. We added a little bit of flour to richen up. But it's got a whole onion in it, carrots, celery, mushrooms, shredded chicken. We're going to top it with a little bit of our Parmesan cheese here, even though we'll dip in our lovely cheese wraps that we made with Gouda and Havarti cheese. And then, of course, for dessert, we will have one of our delicious banana walnut muffins for just a little sweetness at the end. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we made, and you can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets. I've got my cutting boards, my Hexclad pans, my Dutch ovens, all the different gadgets that I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.